Nigerians, we want to thank you for joining us. It's another edition of our personality discussion program on OGTV. The program is called Hot Seat. I am Adeshino Anidube. We must appreciate you for joining us on another edition of that program. Our guest today is a foremost educationist. He is a professor of educational management. Our guest was the very first individual to be promoted to the rank of professor at the then Ogun State University, now Olabisi Onabanjo University. He became a professor at the age of 35. We're talking of Professor E.O.A. Ajayi. Professor Ajayi, thank you for joining us on Hot Seat.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Anidube.
Professor E.O.A. Ajayi was born almost 60 years ago at Orijebu in Ogun State. After his elementary education, he proceeded to the secondary education which he had at St. Patrick's College in Ibadan, 64 to 1968. He then got admitted to the then University of Ife, now Obafemi Awolowo University, to read education combined with history in September of 1970. Our guest on the program today graduated in June 1974 with a second-class honors upper division, and he had every other academic qualifications to his credit and to the glory of God. Our guest on the program, of course, had A average in his coursework at the master's degree level, and he was then to proceed for his PhD program, and his PhD thesis was supervised by the late Professor S.O. Awokoya, a foremost educationist and one-time Minister of Education in the old western region of Nigeria. His thesis, we must inform you this moment, was adjudged one of the best in the university at that time. Our guest on the program had his career spanning over several years. He started with the his university teaching career in September of 1976 as one of the pioneer staff of the University of Ilorin. He rose to the position of senior lecturer in 1983, and when the then Ogun State University was established in 1983, the then young Dr. Ajayi was persuaded to return home to join the Ogun State University as part of his own contributions to the development of his fatherland, among others. As we did tell you, Professor Ajayi became a professor at the age of 35, and he was at the time a provost of the Federal College of Education, Oshele, in Ogun State. He also was at another time the Deputy Vice Chancellor of the Olabisi Onabanjo University in Ogun State. He remains a visiting professor to several universities both within Nigeria and outside Nigeria. And as the program progresses, we shall be leading you more into the accomplishments of our guest on the program today. I tell you, it's called an intimidating CV. Today, we have Professor E.O.A. Ajayi here. The CV is quite extensive.
In fact, one can say that it's going to be an explosive edition. Viewers will really want to watch it from the very first minute to the last minute of this program, because we have one Nigerian in the house that has seen it all when we talk about education in this country.
Yeah, Professor Ajayi, one more time we want to welcome you to the program.
Yeah, thank you very much, Shino.
If we were to start reading your CV from now, the program may not get started. But the fact of the matter is that the state of education in Nigeria as of today has been of great concern to most people. Core stakeholders are also similarly not pleased with what education is presently in Nigeria. You had it all rosy, I want to admit. How are you feeling with the state of education now?
Well, thank you very much, Shino and his colleague. It's nice to be here again. I've been an educationist all my life. I believe, in fact, 35 years ago, that was when I started my university teaching career. Before then, I've also taught in some secondary schools, starting from 1972, 1974, 75, before I joined the university service. Now, it is a pity that the educational system in Nigeria today has found itself in this sorry state. Anytime one thinks about the situation of things, whether the primary, secondary, or tertiary level, my heart bleeds. And let's not forget that no nation can rise above the quality of its educational system. The moment you deride the educational system, then you are done for in this country. And that is why, even the nation itself is not progressing, because we have not placed the type of premium, the type of priority we should put on education. Up till now, there has never been a time when the financial allocation, the budgetary allocation to education has reached the 26% benchmark set by UNESCO. At the federal level, it's as low as 9%, 11%. Even at the state level, some maybe 13, 15 at the maximum. And again, you find out that a lot of times, it's one thing to budget for education, it's another thing to release the entire funds. And it's also another thing to really spend the money for the intended purpose. We all know what corruption is in this country. Naturally, if you have a look, you say you budget 10 million naira for education, and on the ground, you cannot find more than maybe 2 million naira worth of things. Look at what has been happening to U.B.E.C, the Universal Basic Education. It was launched in 1999, relaunched. That of 1976 was the U.P.A program. Now, in 1999, U.B.E.C was launched. And since then, there has been intervention at the federal level and also counterpart funding at the state level. The millions, the billions of naira that have been said to be spent on education, can we really have anything? Can we say we have something concrete to show for it? Especially at the basic level. Now, fortunately, a few months back, I was a member of the transition committee that was set up by this present administration. And I was on the education committee. I happened to have been the chairman of the tertiary subgroup. Now, our committee moved around the entire state, and what we found in the state was so terrible. Anytime one thinks about it, the heart bleeds. Dilapidated structures. You look at the classrooms, nothing to show, nothing to write. I mean, even in a number of places. In Abeokuta here, I can point to some schools whose buildings are collapsing, where students are sitting on the floor. That's even at the primary level. At the secondary and tertiary level in particular, it's most unfortunate. Things are not as they used to be in our own time. When I say in our own time, I think I can say that authoritatively. Because if I've been 35 years in the education industry, I think I have been privileged to know what happened before independence and during independence and our current dispensation.
Now, could it have been that the said funds which states were allowed to access from U.B.E.C had not been accessed in Ogun State in recent past, or that you felt in your own findings that the funds were accessed and perhaps not judiciously utilized? Because the picture you have painted now leaves much to be desired.
Yeah, thank you very much. Let me say this. What I've said is not limited to Ogun State alone. I just to use that as an example, okay, because I happen to have been a member of that committee. Now, U.B.E.C has some stringent conditions. You cannot just go there and collect the money. Now, you must plan, you must present your project, and then you must pay the counterpart part. In Ogun State, for instance, one is aware of the fact that for a number of years, for some years, the state did not assess that U.B.E.C fund because the counterpart part was not put down by the last regime. So, but what I'm even saying is that Now, when you look at some of the structures, not just in Ogun State, all over, because again, I was once a member of the E.O.A Emirs Committee in Abuja, where we assess, we evaluate all the activities of the various states, and what we came up with was that it was not sharing, and that is why up till now, the issue of education for all by the year 2015. Initially, it used to be by the year 2000. It was shifted to 2000 and so up to 2015, and we are now talking about Vision 2020. Now, it is very clear to all of us that we cannot achieve that mission of being among the 20 leading economies in the world by the year 2020, and that's because the state of the educational system is appalling. And like I said earlier on, the fortunes of a nation is tied to a large extent, to the level of its educational system, and that is why we say that no nation can rise above the quality of its educational system.
Okay, Professor Ajayi, let me cut in here now. One can easily deduce that from your explanation, from what you have been able to provide so far, your heart is indeed bleeding because of the collapse, what we call geometric collapse.
Systemic. Systemic collapse, yes.
I wanted to use geometric or arithmetic. Arithmetic will be a step after the other, but geometric, only God knows what will be the margin. But I want to put it to you. You are a learned person. Yeah. You live your life, your whole life, the 35 years that you've spent so far within the educational sector. Is it not, will it be out of place to say that even the so-called learned, those that have had the opportunity at one time or the other to chart a way forward for the educational system of this nation, have been the people that have really been the factor here that have caused the nation what we have today? Because you can't just put a primary six certificate holder there to be commissioner for education or minister of education, and now we'll be blaming such a person. But we have seen professors, we have seen doctorate degree holders, and yet we're in this mess.
That's an interesting scenario that you have painted. Now, let me say this. Just as we say there are professors and there are professors, there are learned and there are learned people. In those days, we used to joke that some people pass through the university, they did not allow the university to pass through them. It's one thing to have the certificate. It's another thing to make effective use of that certificate. And then, if you look at the process of selection in this country or the process of appointing people into positions, you see, merit has been sacrificed at the altar of mediocrity. You can hardly get anything on merit in this country now. It's who you know, it's your political connection or godfatherism and what have you. So that when you look at the way and manner people are appointed to positions, we don't necessarily look for the best. That is the problem. We don't look for the best materials, putting round pegs in round holes. Now, you cannot put a carpenter to do the job of a tailor. If you make a mess of it. Nigeria is not bereft of eminent educationists, people who know their onions. But the problem is that such people will never be allowed to get there. So, and when you put mediocres in positions, naturally, what will happen or what will result from it is a low level of performance. This is one major problem we have. If you are talking about, yes, professors have been ministers of education and what have you, I can mention, one of my mentors, the late Professor Basafunwa, he was a foremost educationist, one of the foremost educationists we've ever produced in this country. When he was Minister of Education, we knew what he did to revamp the educational system. He was my teacher. I served under him because it was during his time as minister that I was made the provost of the Federal College of Education, Ushele. It was during his time that the National Policy on Education came up, and so many innovative programs. But one thing we have in this country again is what we call policy somersault. Consistently inconsistent educational policy formulation and implementation. You have as many policies as you have many governments. There is no continuity in policy formulation and implementation. One government comes and it jettisons what the others have done before, he starts his own. A minister of education comes, he jettisons what what he or she met on ground, and he wants to start his own. If it's removed in another 6 months, another person comes in. That one, takes over, and he introduces his own ideas. This is unlike what operates abroad in US and some other countries. The policies are well thought out and put there. Again, what now, irrespective of the power, the political party in power, they pursue the same policy, but the priorities and then the implementation might be a little bit different. So, but in Nigeria, that's what we call policy somersault and consistently inconsistent educational policy formulation and implementation. That is why, for instance, they are thinking with the idea of jettisoning the 6334 system. Mm-hmm. I don't know what they now want to call it. 6334. Whatever. What is wrong with the 6334 system? There's nothing basically wrong with it. But it has not succeeded because of defective implementation. We have not implemented the program, Those who sat down and came up with that policy, thought seriously about it, and they came up with all this something. At the end of the day, even though university education is supposed to be the apex, but it's not supposed to be the only. But at the end of the day now, everybody wants to be a university graduate. Nobody wants to go to the Polytechnic or College of Education. Nobody wants to go to any vocational institution. Everybody university. And that is why you find less than 10% of those who apply for university admission being given the chance. Because we don't have, enough universities.
Now, we also cannot be talking about the fact that there are persistent cases of policy somersault in Nigeria without also putting the blame back to the academics. Because one would expect naturally that if it were the politicians alone that are engaged in the process of governance, then we could be talking about the need to actually have their ego probably massaged by having their own initiatives in the form of new policies, new policy directions, and so on and so forth. Those you have spoken of so far have been established academics. I put it back to you, Professor Ajayi, that still the learned persons remain a major factor within the Nigerian problem.
Now, maybe you didn't quite get what I was saying. There is no doubt, that we have had learned people, professors, doctors, and what have you, as commissioners for education, as ministers of education, and what have you. Now, but what I'm saying is that they may not necessarily be the best material around. People get all this, and the way people are appointed into positions in this country. That's why I said meritocracy has been sacrificed at the altar of mediocrity. Everything depends on whom you know. Everything depends on your, godfatherism, political connections, or this or that. Not necessarily what you have up here. And you find out a number of, there are times, unfortunately, there are some of our colleagues, there's no doubt about it, that when they get into power, it is, if you cannot beat them to it, join them. They forget where they are coming from, and then they join the bandwagon. And they become, a sort of, sorry sight, We start looking at, having a look at all this, are these really university graduates? Are these learned people? And besides, let me say that, especially when you talk about education, we are talking about professionalism. For instance, in law, you cannot be made a minister of law, or,
Justice.
A minister of justice, rather, if you are not a lawyer. They will never agree. In medicine, too, you must either be a medical doctor or a pharmacist, or what have you. In fact, most times, medical doctors dominate the field. They don't even want to allow even pharmacists and others. Now, but education is such that everybody claims to be knowledgeable in. Everybody claims to be an educationist. And late Fafunwa was an educationist by excellence. And we can see what he did when he was the Minister of Education. The same thing applies to some others, But the moment, you put some other people that, whose professional training are not in any way related to education, what they do is they learn through trial and error. They come up with ideas that are antithetical. At the end of the day, will be counterproductive. So normally what we say is that, what we normally advocate is that let us put round pegs in round holes. Let us put sentiments aside. Let us allow merit to guide our actions and activities if we really want to progress in this country. If we want to be among the leading nations of the world, then we must sit down and do things differently.
All right, okay. Now, again, yeah, if I may put it to you, using this phrase, quoting your phrase now, in our own days, when you were about gaining admission to university, there was either one or two hurdles that you have to cross. Once you have your WAEC, and possibly maybe you go for A-levels before you now get into the university, then you go for your degree program and the rest. But nowadays, things have changed. A lot of hurdles that you have to cross these days now. Even WAEC was the only examination for a school leaver. NECO came on board when people felt that, okay, WAEC was being strict or was being too strict. So NECO came on board and NECO joined the train. And yet, we're not satisfied. We came up with JAMB, because there was no JAMB during your own time. JAMB also joined the train. And still not comfortable with that, we came up with post-UME, which is today now called post-UTME. With all these laid down factors that I've just put before you, one will discover that the educational system in Nigeria is indeed nosediving. That is why we are now trying every possible means to really, place these these people that are coming into the university, to really put them to test and know whether they have the will to undergo such a course or not, so that by the time they are leaving the university, they will have become, something that you can really point to and say, yes, this will go out there and also replicate what you have imbibed in him. But unfortunately, I still put it back to you, the academics is not doing enough till today. A lot of people have felt that, okay, because the economy is in this position, because of that, they've now left what they are primarily supposed to do at the detriment of the educational system of this nation. So what can you say in that direction?
Yeah, let me say this. Now, during our own time, we had entrance examinations into universities. It was just that each university was conducting its own entrance examination, especially for school certificate holders. During that time, you either go in through what we call prelim or through direct entry. If you have your HSC or NCE or A-levels, and you present you collect the form to a particular university, they evaluate, they score you, and then you get admission. I came in through prelim. I didn't go through A-levels. I had my school cert, and I took the entrance examination at that time to 3 different universities. I eventually chose CIFE. Right. So now, later on, this idea, you see, it's so many people were being denied opportunity because, okay, I got admission, I was admitted into 3. I eventually chose 1. I must have denied some other people the opportunities of getting admission into these other 2 that I jettisoned. So the JAMB exam came in so that at least JAMB can conduct examinations. People have a choice. You can choose 2 universities. That was under JAMB until you have this UTME. You see, at the time when UTME came on board, you see, they were conducting different examinations for polytechnics and colleges of education and that of the universities. But you discovered that many people take polytechnics and colleges of education as the last resort. You find out that very few people take this PCE, they call it PCE exam then. Now, the 2 have not been combined. They take the same examination. And depending on the level of performance, the cutoff point for university is different from that of the polytechnic. And candidates have opportunities now of selecting universities, polytechnics, and college of education. Now, I know that there has been a lot of controversy in recent times over the issue of JAMB being the only body to organize examinations, entrance examinations into universities. The universities decided to be organizing this screening exercise even after candidates have met the cutoff point. You see, JAMB is supposed now to be a clearinghouse. They conduct the JAMB exam. If you score either 180 or 200, depending. Now you go for the next stage. And that was simply because, we discovered at the time, because I was fully involved in all these examinations as a university lecturer, even as a deputy vice chancellor then, we discovered that, some of the candidates who scored 260, 280 in JAMB, by the time we put them through the screening, many of them were failing. And come to think of it, I remember at Olabisi Onabanjo University, the first time we conducted the post-UTME exam, what we did was, we selected the questions were selected from past JAMB examinations. So they were nothing different. And when we conducted this, we discovered that even some of those who scored low were scoring high, and those who scored high marks were scoring low marks. So in other words, you see, no system is foolproof in this country. We are not saying that the one we conducted in the university is totally, but at least it is a way of further screening candidates to really pick the best out of the best, for university education. And as far as I'm concerned, I think, we should still allow the post-UTME to continue. It is in the best interest of the system. I know that, the House of, the Senate, the National Assembly generally, they have been debating this issue. Well, they can go ahead and debate. But I believe the NUC Executive Secretary has been defending this issue of post-UTME. The Minister of Education too, the Federal Minister of Education, has put a weight behind an appeal to the National Assembly not to pass any law that will scrap the post-UTME, because there is no doubt that with the conduct of with this introduction of this post-UTME, we have been able to screen out so many miscreants. People who just find one way or the other of getting people to write down for them. They come in because they have high marks, and they become problems to us in the system. Because it's not just the exam. Some of the things that we introduce are ways of determining the character of some of these people. In some universities, I know that they don't even give them written exams. But I remember at E.O.A, at the University of Ibadan, in 2009, I was there as a visiting scholar. What we did in my department was that we were interviewing the candidates. We were calling them in one by one. It was very tedious, very rigorous. But at the end of the day, we were able to, in the process of interacting, if somebody says, okay, you read biology, and then you ask a simple question, that person should be able to answer. If you cannot answer it, then it means there's something wrong. And then you also are able to test the character. You are even able to know this person is likely to be, to engage in what we call antisocial behaviors. So by the time you do all these things, you are able to screen properly those who will come in. And then, otherwise, if we don't do all these things, the standard will continue to nosedive.
Now, most African countries have repeatedly failed to live by the UNESCO 26% benchmark for the funding of education. We shall be taking a look now at the quality and level of funding of higher institutions in Nigeria, for instance. The 26% UNESCO benchmark is for the overall education industry, specifically higher institutions in Nigeria. What is the level of funding? The level of funding, is it such that can actually assist both the instructors and those who are also being taught, talking of the students now, to actually have something substantial as a final output?
Yeah, thank you very much. This is a very interesting question. But the answer I'm going to provide, I'm going to divide the situation at the federal level and the situation at the state levels. Let me start with the states. Now, you see, establishing university is not like establishing, nursery primary schools. And that's one thing many of our, governments must realize. It is capital intensive. It requires a lot of fund. Now, so if you are going to, establish a university, you must be prepared to spend. There is no point, having 2, 3, 4 universities in a state where you cannot successfully fund, adequately fund one. I cannot but refer to our state here. Now, Olabisi Onabanjo Ogun State University which turned to Olabisi Onabanjo University, was established in 1983. Now, by the founding fathers, the late Bisi Onabanjo, the first civilian governor of Ogun State, Bisi Onabanjo tried his best to fund that university within the limits of the funds available to the state. But after some time, the university became an orphan with subsequent governments, to the extent that the funding pattern was going down and down and down and down. When you don't provide adequate funds and you expect such universities to perform miracles, to conduct research, meaningful research, and come up with inventions and findings, it's not possible. At the time, there was this issue of cost sharing, that okay, you now have to go and generate some funds to supplement